Hello and welcome to Indus News from Islamabad. I am Aneeb Hamid and these are the headlines. In Pakistan, the security forces have killed 6 terrorists and arrested 10 others in an intelligence-based operation in North Waziristan. The military's media wing said high-profile terrorist commander Wasim Zakaria was also among those killed. It said Zakaria was the mastermind of more than 30 terror attacks. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad says he wants to expand economic partnership with Moscow to help offset US sanctions. He said this during a meeting with Russia's Deputy Prime Minister Yuri Borisov and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Damascus. Lavrov said Syria needs international help to rebuild its economy badly hammered by sanctions and years of war. In Belarus, local media says unidentified masked men have detained a leading opposition figure, Maria Kolesnikova, in central Minsk. This comes hours after security forces arrested 633 protesters following a mass rally against President Alexander Lukashenko. Police say they are verifying reports of Kolesnikova's abduction. India has surpassed Brazil to become the second worst COVID-19 hit nation in the world with more than 4.2 million infections. India has reported the world's highest daily deaths as 1,016 more people died, nearly 91,000 tested positive for the virus overnight. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 3 people have died since yesterday, raising the death toll to 6,345. The coronavirus has infected over 27 million people, claiming more than 882,000 lives across the globe. More news coming up after this short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now let's start the news in detail. We start from Pakistan, where security forces have killed 6 terrorists in an intelligence-based operation in North Waziristan. The military's media wing said 10 other terrorists were arrested during the operation. It said high-profile terrorist commander Wasim Zakaria was also among those killed. It added Zakaria was the mastermind of more than 30 terror attacks. Now, India has reported the world's highest daily COVID-19 deaths as 1,016 more people died and nearly 91,000 tested positive for the virus overnight. The coronavirus has infected over 27 million people, claiming more than 882,000 lives across the globe. Details in this report.
After ravaging the Americas for months, the novel coronavirus now has Europe and India in its sights, killing and infecting thousands every day. India has surpassed Brazil to become the second worst COVID-19 hit nation in the world, with more than 4.2 million infections. France's daily cases fell slightly after reporting a post-lockdown spike over the weekend. Italy dashed football fans' hope, saying spectators will not be allowed to attend matches from the start of the new season. The second wave is threatening the UK's recovery now as the country reported its highest number of fresh cases since May.
It's at the moment predominantly amongst younger people, but we know that that then leads to cases amongst older people because people inevitably can't help but pass the disease on to their family, their grandparents. And we've seen that in so many other countries. So I'm concerned about the figures, but the most important thing is that everybody needs to follow social distancing.
In Asia, mainland China has registered a 22nd consecutive day without local infections, but South Korea continues to struggle the community spread. Meanwhile, new cases in Australia's state of Victoria are declining after another spike amid stringent lockdown measures.
We are sticking together, we are looking out for each other, and we are having considerable success. And the best way to I suppose, define that is that on the 5th of August, we had 725 cases. On the 7th of September, we have 41 cases. These numbers are coming down. This strategy is working. We are bringing a sense of control to this, and we will drive these numbers down further.
In the Americas, the U.S. has reported rising cases in 22 of its states as the country celebrates its end-of-summer Labor Day weekend. Brazil has registered more than 14,500 infections and 447 deaths in a day. Mexico has recorded over 4,600 cases and 232 more deaths overnight.
Meanwhile, Pakistan's COVID-19 death rate continues to drop as the country reports 3 deaths in the last 24 hours. The Health Ministry says the death toll in the country is at 6,345. The ministry said over 286,000 patients have recovered across the country as the number of active cases has dropped to 6,542. It said new infections rate has also decreased as 394 people tested positive for the virus in the last 24 hours. Meanwhile, European Union Ambassador to Pakistan, Androla Kaminara, has applauded Islamabad for containing the pandemic. In an interview, Kaminara said Pakistan's government's measures such as smart lockdowns, testing and tracing have considerably contained the virus spread. The EU envoy also appreciated Islamabad's initiatives to stimulate the economy during the difficult time. Now, NATO's representative in Afghanistan, Stefano Pontecorvo, has urged the warring sides in Afghanistan to start direct talks. He said this while meeting with High Council for National Reconciliation Chief Abdullah in Kabul. Pontecorvo said the alliance is committed to supporting Afghanistan and the security forces towards long-term peace and security. Kabul and the Taliban have announced their delegations for the intra-Afghan negotiations set to begin in Qatar. U.S. envoy Zalmay Khalilzad has also arrived in Doha to push for the start of the talks. Now, 6 members of a family have been killed after a mortar shell hit their house in Afghanistan's eastern Nangarhar province. Officials said 5 children and a woman were among those killed, while 4 others were injured in the attack in western Shirzad district. The Nangarhar governor has announced the formation of a delegation to investigate the incident. No group has claimed responsibility, while the Taliban have blamed the government forces for the attack. Moving on, U.S. President Donald Trump has welcomed the opening of Saudi airspace to flights between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. A White House spokesman said President Trump called Saudi King Salman on the phone to share his views. The spokesman said the 2 leaders also discussed ways to enhance regional security. He said Trump also urged Saudi Arabia to negotiate with other Gulf countries to resolve the rift with Israel. During the conversation, King Salman expressed the kingdom's willingness to reach a permanent and just solution to the Palestine issue to bring peace. Earlier, Saudi General Authority for Civil Aviation approved the UAE's request to allow all flights over the kingdom's airspace. Saudi state media said the approval was given on the request of UAE. Moving on now, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad says he wants to expand economic partnership with Moscow to help offset U.S. sanctions. He said this during a meeting with Russia's Deputy Prime Minister Yuri Borisov and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Damascus. Assad said he wanted Russian investment in key areas of the economy. Lavrov said Syria needs international help to rebuild its economy badly hammered by sanctions and years of war. Officials from Syria and Russia have said the 2 sides plan to boost trade ties and will review energy, mining and power projects. Russia's military support since 2015 has helped Damascus reverse gains by militants and rebel groups. Although Assad has now regained most of the territory he lost, the economy is in tatters, leaving many Syrians in poverty. Now, the Libyan army says it has seized a helicopter belonging to warlord Khalifa Haftar's militia. In a statement, an army spokesperson said the helicopter was seized after making an emergency landing east of the capital, Tripoli. The spokesperson said the pilot is likely to have fled towards the desert for fear of capture. On August 27, the Libyan army announced the first breach of Libya's ceasefire by Haftar's militia. It said Haftar forces fired more than a dozen Grad rockets at the army positions west of Sirte. Meanwhile, delegates from Libya's rival administrations met for talks in Morocco. It was attended by 5 members, each from eastern Libya's House of Representatives and High Council of State located in Tripoli. United Kingdom ministers are reportedly planning a new legislation that will override a key part of the Brexit deal with the European Union. The move will eliminate a requirement for the new Northern Ireland customs arrangements. Downing Street said making a new law is a standby plan in the case the UK-EU trade talks fail. Earlier, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson set a deadline of October 15 to strike a free trade deal with the bloc. Meanwhile, the EU's chief Brexit negotiator Michel Barnier said he is worried about negotiations as the UK wants the best of the two worlds in the deal. The EU had also indicated that a trade deal with the UK will have to be reached by mid-October. Any trade deal agreed between Britain and the European bloc will need ratification from the European Union Parliament. Britain left the EU on January 31st, 3.5 years after the country narrowly voted to leave the bloc. Meanwhile, the European Union said Britain must honour its agreement on the withdrawal from the bloc if it wants to have a deal on any future relationship with the 27-nation bloc. The head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, said she trusts the British government to implement the withdrawal agreement. She said the withdrawal agreement is an obligation under international law and a prerequisite for any future partnership. Meanwhile, Germany said it is convinced that a divorce deal between Britain and the European Union can still be reached. A German government spokesman said there is little time left and London must make concessions in talks. Now in the UK, police have arrested a man on suspicion of murder and attempted murder after stabbings in the city of Birmingham. In a statement, police said the suspect was arrested in Selly Oak. Earlier, one person was killed and 7 others were wounded in a series of stabbings. Police launched a murder investigation following the incident and said there was no indication that the attacks were terror-related. Moving on, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange's legal battle to avoid extradition to the United States will resume today in a London court. The court proceedings were suspended for months due to the coronavirus lockdown. Assange is being tried of conspiring to hack government computers and violating an espionage law which he denies. The allegations have been tied to the confidential diplomatic cables by WikiLeaks in 2010 and 2011. His legal team in London has argued that the US charges against him were political and represented a threat to freedom of the press. They have also said he will be a suicide risk if sent to the US, where he can face years in prison. Meanwhile, Russia has accused Germany of deliberately delaying the investigation into the alleged poisoning of Alexei Navalny, a Kremlin critic. Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said Berlin has still not responded to the request for legal assistance by the Russian prosecutor. General's office made on August 27th. Zakharova said by not responding to the request, Berlin is stonewalling the investigation process. However, German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas says the request for legal assistance was approved long ago. In an interview, Maas accused Moscow of creating a smokescreen. Earlier, Germany walks back its threat of suspending the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline project over the issue. Now moving to Belarus, where the local media says unidentified masked men have detained a leading opposition figure, Maria Kolesnikova, in central Minsk. This comes hours after security forces arrested 633 protesters following a mass rally against President Alexander Lukashenko. Police say they are verifying reports of Kolesnikova's abduction. She was one of the 3 women who united to challenge Lukashenko in August presidential elections. Protesters accuse the president of rigging the vote, a claim which he denies. Other opposition candidates were either jailed or driven to flee Belarus. More news coming up in this bulletin after a short break. Stay tuned. Since its establishment in 1947, the Pakistan Air Force has been involved in various combat operations to uphold the country's aerial defense. But its record-breaking role in the 1965 war against India registered a new chapter of bravery. More in this report by our correspondent Sumaira Khan from Islamabad.
The success story of the Pakistan Air Force continues from 1965 to the Operation Swift Retort 2019, when PAF jets shot down 2 Indian aircrafts in a dogfight on the 27th of February. This shattered the Indian dream of establishing a new normal to dominate the region. The brief aerial encounter between 2 nuclear powers also challenged the myth of India's conventional superiority. PAF Wing Commander Mohammad Asif Nadeem says it wasn't just a hardcore training, but also motivation and passion that led the Pakistan Air Force to the victory.
If we talk about tangible factors, our adversary has been and maybe right now has that edge over us. But the motivation, in motivation there are so many things which comes under motivation. One of them is the training we get from our, once we start our journey from Pakistan Air Force Academy. And you must have heard the stories, rather must have studied our war heroes like Alam, and the kind of inspiration we draw from them.
The wing commander said the Pakistan Air Force has always successfully thwarted the aggression of the Indian Air Force, which is superior in resources but far less in skills and passion.
From Chief of Air Staff till the lower rank people, all were motivated, they were up to the task, and they were ready to take on any kind of challenge.
Wing Commander Asif shrugged off the recent induction of French Rafale jets into the Indian Air Force, saying the PAF is a hard-hitting force capable of taking on any challenge by the enemy. Initially, it was being thought that Pakistan Air Force has only fought against India in all the battles. But the truth is, Pakistan Air Force has earned many titles and badges globally, including Saviors of the Nation. Reporting for Indus News, Sumaira Khan, Noor Khan Air Base, Rawalpindi.
As Pakistan is marking Air Force Day, former squadron leader Ghani Akbar recalls the Pathankot strike in 1965 war and victory against India. More in this report by our correspondent Minahil Ahmed from Islamabad.
26-year-old squadron leader Ghani Akbar was on his way to Peshawar when he was told to abandon all plans and report to the base. India had launched an attack on Pakistan's eastern border with all it could muster up. Even today, Akbar's eyes light up when he talks about the excitement that rushed through his veins the day he took to his cockpit in September 1965.
When I pulled up, I kept my eyes fixed on that aeroplane, maneuvering the plane in such a way that I come for the second attack. The leader did not like it. I had violated the initial briefing, but sometime during the war you can do that. The people up there, Wing Commander Tabab, who was doing the CAP mission, he also shouted, "Come on, number 8, exit." I said, "I'm going to take this aeroplane and then I will go." So I came, I aimed at it, and I got the second aeroplane also. I caught fire, so I blew it up.
The Pathankot strike was one of the decisive blows to Indian aggressors and struck the fear of Pakistan Air Force into the heart of the enemy that lives to this day. The 82-year-old war veteran believes numbers aren't what defines the outcome of a war, and the 1965 war proved that. History, he says, is replete with instances where massive armies were made to kneel before high-spirited, relentless, and extremely skilled warriors.
We were better trained. Morale was very high. And then we had a reason to fight. The reason was that they had come and attacked, they violated our border. So being outnumbered, that does not matter. What matters during the war is always man behind the gun, how he feels and what aim he has, for what aim he is fighting.
Akbar says his body might have taken the toll of age, but the heart is still young and pumping with the same fiery patriotism. Reporting for Indus News, Minahil Ahmed, Islamabad.
Now we are joined by Defence Analyst Air Marshal Retired Masood Akhtar for more on this. Now, thank you very much, Mr. Masood, for joining us on Indus News. Mr. Masood, what were the reasons behind Pakistan Air Force's total dominance against their Indian rivals in the 1965 war?
Well. I am an Air Blue warrior. I take pride in this. 65 war, 6th and 7th of September, especially 7th of September was a red letter day for us. We dominated the skies across the border, and the reason was training, belief, and the fact that we knew we are fighting with our backs to the walls with an enemy which is much bigger. And I think the mood was set when late Rafiqi and Imtiaz Bhatti Saab shot 4 vampires on the 1st of September over River Tavi around Chamjodiya, when their air chief was flying low level in an L-19 to see where the enemy and the Pakistani armor were fighting bumper to bumper, so that tomorrow when the war is declared and we have to go and support them, what do we do? So when we shot 4 vampires, we set the writing in the wall, and that was that Pakistan Air Force is not to be tinkered with, and they withdrew all their Oregons and all their vampire force after this incident, and that was almost 1/4 of their total strength. So that was the kind of dominance that Pakistan Air Force brought about. Leadership number 1, training number 2, belief number 3, and number 4, that we knew that we are fighting with our backs to the walls.
And Mr. Masood, how do you weigh the air combat capabilities of the two countries now?
Well, today we can match, and 27th February last year showed that this Air Force still has the capacity to stand its own ground, exactly like 65, like 71, like it happened in Kargil, like it happened against a different enemy during the Afghan war. So not only that we can stand on our own, we can take the war to the enemy, and like the present Air Chief, he said that next time the enemy should not misunderstand us. Our response is not going to be calibrated, it is not going to be graduated, it is not going to be proportionate. And what he was trying to say was, we have the capacity to do more than what we did on 27th. We may have the BBRs, the Indians may have gotten the Rafales, they may get the Meteors. We have parallel quality. We may not have the quantity. We may be 1/3, if maybe a little more, a little less than half of what the Indian Air Force frontline capability is. But we chose last time on 27th of February that we are not going to do anything more than proportionate, calibrated, and graduated response, so that there are no chances of escalation of war. Because when you employ air power across the border, escalation ladder can go out of the control of both the political leadership. That could have happened. We gave a message, we re-established deterrence in broad daylight, and Shekhar Gupta of the Print and Praveen Swani, they actually said this, that they violated our borders at night. We did this in broad daylight to say that we can do it, and Indians did not dare retaliate after that. They threatened missile attacks, but not employ air power after that. So in quality, we are almost as good. They may be getting the Meteors, etc., but our leadership is fully cognizant as to what is to be done. So even today, we have got quality, quantity, relatively, but we have training, we have belief, we have leadership. We know that we are going to fight outnumbered, but more importantly, our Air Force is a battle-hardened Air Force after having fought successfully the counterinsurgency war.
Right, absolutely correct. Air Marshal retired Masood Akhtar, thank you very much for talking to Indus News. Now moving on with the news series, China says it will hold further military exercises from today along its northeast and eastern coast. The latest series of back-to-back drills comes against a backdrop of rising tensions following U.S. criticism of Beijing's actions in the South China Sea. Beijing's Maritime Safety Administration said the first set of exercises will take place in the High Sea. The second set, including live fire exercises, will be held in the southern Yellow Sea tomorrow. All other ships are prohibited from entering the drill area. China and the US have been at loggerheads over a range of issues from the coronavirus pandemic to trade and territorial integrity. China says it will continue its cooperation with US journalists in the country if Chinese journalists in America are treated fairly. This comes after reports that China delayed renewing lapsed media credentials for some reporters at the US outlets. In a tweet, Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Hua Chunying said China is processing the visa extension application submitted by some US journalists. She said the affected journalists can continue to live and work in China. The Wall Street Journal and CNN each reported that one of their journalists were issued letters allowing them to continue working in China. The permission has been allotted to these journalists with expired press credentials. Moving on, Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh says the normalization drive between Israel and some Arab countries does not reflect the sentiment of the people. Speaking during a rally at a Palestinian refugee camp in Lebanon, Haniyeh said Palestinians will not forget their land principles and the right to return. During his visit, Haniyeh met with various Lebanese political leaders, including Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah. He said people of Palestine will never forget the historical injustice by Israel.
We tell the enemy we will never forget and never forgive this historical injustice. We will not forget our land, our principles, our Jerusalem, our right to return no matter the sacrifices, difficulties and obstacles.
Meanwhile, almost 300 Rohingya refugees believed to have been at sea for 6 months have landed in Indonesia's Aceh province. Aceh police said a wooden boat carrying the Rohingya landed at the Ujung Blang beach today. Police said there are 181 women and 14 children among the refugees. Local head of the Red Cross said the rescued group of people is currently being held in a temporary location. He said they will be moved to the evacuation center, but their health, especially related to COVID-19, is the main concern. Now moving to South Korea, where more than 2 million people have been ordered to evacuate as Typhoon HAISHEN slams the Korean peninsula. The country's safety ministry said at least 32 people were injured and 4 others are missing in a number of incidents across the country. Korea's Met Department said the typhoon is carrying the disastrous winds of 126 kilometers per hour, causing river swells and flooding. More than 30,000 households in southern city of Ulsan have no electricity. Across the country, more than 76 flights were cancelled and several train services are suspended. Meanwhile, 2 nuclear reactors have also been shut down. Typhoon HAISHEN is also projected to make landfall in North Korea. Moving on now, the U.S. state of California has declared a state of emergency in 5 counties amid powerful wildfires that have already claimed 8 lives. California Governor Gavin Newsom said the counties include Fresno, Madera, Mariposa, San Bernardino and San Diego. California's fire department said nearly 14,800 firefighters are battling 23 major fires across the state. The state recently dealt with the creek fire that burned about 45,000 acres, prompting mass evacuations. Cal Fire said 2 active wildfires are the second and third largest wildfire incidents in the state's history. Since mid-August, California has seen over 900 wildfires, which have now burned over 1.6 million acres. The Swiss Parliament is set to start a debate on the reduction of carbon dioxide emissions today. The debate comes after the alarming amount of recession of the glaciers in the Western Europe's tallest mountain ranges. More details in this report.
In Switzerland, climate activists have protested at the foot of the Triant Glacier in Europe's Alps mountain range to highlight the effects of global warming. Triant, a Mont Blanc massif, has receded by almost 1,000 meters in just last 30 years and is one of the main melting glaciers in the Alps. The glaciers Dortmund and Triant within the Switzerland's borders have melted massively over the past years. The activists urge the authorities to take action against carbon dioxide emissions.
The problem we face is that here are the Alps. Temperatures have risen by 2 degrees Celsius, and this rise in temperature is visible here at the Triant Glacier, and it means that all of the glaciers in the Alps are melting. The Triant Glacier has receded by 1,000 meters over the past 30 years.
Earlier last month, the Turkmen Glacier also split into two parts in a vigorous collapse and lost almost 300,000 cubic meters. Authorities warn that 90% of the 1,500 glaciers remaining in the region will deplete by the end of the century if nothing is done to cut emissions.
More news coming up in this bulletin after a short break. Stay tuned. In business news, Asia-Pacific markets are trading mixed as investors reacted to rising tech tensions between Washington and Beijing. Mainland Chinese stocks have shed earlier gains and are now trading lower. The Shenzhen component has slipped over 0.5%, while the Shanghai Composite also slipped fractionally. In Japan, the Nikkei 225 and Topix index have also shed marginally. Australia's ASX 200 is trading fractionally lower, but Hong Kong's Hang Seng index has edged up. While South Korea's Kospi has gained over 0.5%, overall the MSCI Asia ex-Japan index was little changed. Newcastle United have signed striker Callum Wilson on a 4-year deal from Bournemouth. Wilson scored 67 goals in 187 games in all competitions for Bournemouth after his arrival from Coventry in 2014. The striker has also made 4 appearances for the team England. He is Steve Bruce's third summer signing since the collapse of the proposed takeover of the club in July. Wilson follows midfielder Jeff Hendrick and goalkeeper Mark Gillespie's arrival at St James Park on free transfers. And now let's have a look at the weather updates across the globe. Well, that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Take care.